Under the dark glow of a dying sun, a small team of space explorers landed on the surface of a long-forgotten military base that circled a dead planet. The base looked broken and silent, its walls covered with cracks, rust, and shadows of the years gone by. Not a single light flickered inside, yet something strange was happening. Signals, faint and steady, were still being sent from this place. Signals that no one could explain. The team had come to find the truth, but as the ramp of their ship lowered and their boots touched the cold steel ground, every step they took carried the weight of unease. The leader, Captain Rayner, stood tall at the front. His helmet visor reflected the ruins around him, but his eyes never left the horizon. He was a man of duty, cautious yet bold, and his voice carried quiet command. "We're going in," he said, and the rest of the team followed. Behind him walked Dr. Alara, the scientist, her hands gripping her scanner as its green light pulsed softly. To her side was Lieutenant Cade, a soldier built like iron but with nerves that twitched at every creak of the base. At the rear moved Jonas, the engineer, silent but watchful, carrying heavy tools across his back. Together they entered the shadow of the abandoned base, the silence pressing against their ears like a warning no one wanted to speak. The doors hissed faintly when they pushed through, as though the place had not truly died. The corridors were long and empty, their walls carrying scars of fire and time. Panels hung broken, wires dangled like vines, and the floor echoed under their boots. There was no sound of machines running, yet here and there they heard faint noises, metal creaking, something shifting in the distance, as though the base itself breathed in its sleep. Alara's scanner beeped suddenly, sharp and quick, pulling every pair of eyes toward her. She frowned, studying the screen. "Energy readings," she whispered. "They're not supposed to exist here. Something is still alive." Rayner's jaw tightened. He had seen too many dead places in his life, but this one felt different. It was not just a ruin. It was watching them. The group moved deeper, stepping through a shattered hall where windows revealed the planet below. The surface stretched out in endless grey wasteland, a sea of lifeless dust and stone. Nothing could live there, not anymore. Yet in the backyard of the base, visible through one cracked window, there was movement, shadows shifting where no wind blew. Jonas pointed toward it, his voice low. "Captain, did you see that?" Rayner did not answer, only motioned for them to continue. They passed rooms filled with broken equipment, rusted weapons, and crates covered in dust. A half-burned flag of the old military still clung to one wall, a symbol of power that once ruled this outpost. Now it was nothing but ash. Still, in the silence, there was something else. A faint hum, soft but growing stronger as they walked. It was like the heartbeat of a machine, buried deep, waiting to be found. The closer they got to the backyard, the more the air seemed to change. The cold grew sharper, each breath forming mist inside their helmets. Dr. Alara whispered, "This doesn't make sense. The temperature is dropping, but there's no system running." Lieutenant Cade's hand gripped the handle of his weapon, his nerves stretched tight. "Feels like someone's leading us there," he muttered. Rayner stopped and looked at his team. His voice was calm, but there was steel inside it. "We came here for answers. No turning back now." When they reached the final door that opened into the backyard, the sound came clearer, a low, steady thrum like the ground itself was alive. Rayner pressed his hand against the panel. Sparks jumped, but the door slid open slowly, groaning with the weight of years. Beyond it lay the backyard, and what they saw made them stop in silence. The backyard was not empty. Alien plants, glowing faintly with blue light, had grown over the broken machines and scattered weapons. The ground was cracked, and in the cracks, something moved, shadows sliding away whenever the team shone their lights. Half buried in the soil was a metallic structure, still pulsing with energy. It looked alive, as though it had a heartbeat of its own. The team stared, none of them speaking, but they all felt the same truth: whatever had been left here had not died. It had only been waiting. Dr. Alara's scanner screamed with signals now, filling the air with fast, sharp beeps. Her voice trembled. "It's not mechanical, it's biological." Jonas turned pale, his eyes darting to the ground. "But that means," before he could finish, the soil near his feet cracked open. A sound like grinding metal echoed through the yard. Something began to rise. At first, it looked like a shadow. Then it grew into a shape, tall and sharp, with eyes glowing red through the dark. Its body was half steel, half flesh, like an experiment that had broken every law of nature. The team froze, their breaths shallow, their hearts racing. It stood there, watching them with a gaze that felt older than the base itself. Captain Rayner's voice was low, steady, but filled with a warning. This is no ghost. This base was abandoned for a reason. The creature's eyes flickered, and it vanished back into the earth, leaving only silence behind. The explorers looked at each other, their faces pale behind the glass of their helmets. Whatever lived here was not dead. Whatever waited in the backyard had been sleeping. And now, it was awake. Under the dim light of their helmet lamps, the explorers stepped cautiously into the backyard, their boots crunching against the cracked soil that seemed to tremble with every movement. The air felt thicker here, as if it carried weight, and the silence pressed down so heavily it became a sound of its own. Captain Rayner scanned the area with sharp eyes, every muscle in his body alert. The alien plants glowed faintly, bending toward the team as if reaching out, their faint blue light casting shadows across the broken remains of machines left to rot. Half-sunken towers leaned dangerously, old communication dishes pointed uselessly at the starless sky. In the distance, dark shapes moved against the ruined walls, melting away whenever the light touched them. The team slowed, each step drawing them deeper into an unknown world that should not exist in a place abandoned for decades. Dr. Alara knelt near one of the cracks in the ground, her scanner buzzing in her hand, its green glow trembling wildly. She brushed dust aside and saw the fresh outline of something unmistakable, a footprint. Her voice broke the silence, low but urgent. This is recent. The others froze. Jonas leaned closer, his breath fogging inside his visor. But no one's been here for years. How is that possible? The scanner beeped again, faster now, pulling their attention further into the yard. Beyond the cracked soil, something pulsed faintly beneath the ground, like a hidden heartbeat. Lieutenant Cage shifted uneasily, his hand gripping his weapon tighter. His instincts screamed danger, and his soldier's mind read the signs clearly. They were not alone. He glanced at Rayner, waiting for the order to pull back, but the captain's jaw was set in iron determination. "We came here to find the source of the signals," Rayner said, his voice steady though the tension in his eyes betrayed him. "Until we know what's out there, we keep moving." The path led them past rows of collapsed storage crates. Some were torn open from the inside, their metal edges bent outward as if something had clawed its way free. The smell of rust and ash filled the air, and with it, a faint undertone of something sharp and unfamiliar, like burning chemicals mixed with decay. The glow of the plants thickened the further they went, forming a surreal garden of light that should have been beautiful, yet instead felt suffocating. The ground trembled again beneath their boots, not from their weight but from something beneath them, moving, waiting. Jonas slowed his steps, his eyes darting toward the shadows stretching under the glowing plants. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. The others stopped, listening. At first, there was only silence. Then, faintly, came the sound of scraping metal against stone. It was slow, deliberate, like claws dragging across the earth. Cade raised his weapon, scanning the darkness. His voice was sharp. "We're being followed." The noise grew louder, closer, then vanished suddenly as if cut off mid-breath. The silence that followed was worse, heavier, pressing on their nerves until every hair on their bodies stood on end. Ilara's scanner chirped again, louder now, pulling her attention to the center of the yard. There, half buried in soil and glowing faintly with shifting light, was a metallic structure unlike anything they had seen before. It was round, covered in symbols that pulsed like veins, alive with energy. Its surface shifted faintly, as though it wasn't metal at all but something that breathed. The team gathered around it, their faces pale and tense. This isn't just a machine," Ilara whispered. Her fingers hovered above the glowing surface, too afraid to touch. "It's alive. Or it was made to be alive." Rayner's eyes narrowed. "Military experiments," he said grimly. "This is what they left behind." He turned his head, scanning the empty yard. "And I think it's what's calling us here." As if his words carried weight, the ground beneath them rumbled again, stronger this time. The cracked soil split wider, releasing a hiss of cold air that curled around their legs like mist. Jonas stepped back, his heart pounding. "Captain, I don't think we should be here." His voice carried panic, and even Cade's hardened face showed unease. But before anyone could reply, Alara's scanner erupted in sound, shrill and wild, the green light flashing so violently it lit the entire yard. From the far side of the cracked soil, shadows peeled away from the ground and began to move. First one shape, then another, rising slowly. Glowing eyes flickered in the dark, red and unblinking, locking onto the team with unnatural stillness. The explorers stood frozen as more eyes appeared, dozens of them, circling in the distance. The soil shifted, bulging upward as something massive crawled beneath it, the sound of grinding metal echoing through the night. The explorers raised their lights, beams cutting across the yard, and for a moment the figures froze, retreating slightly into the shadows. But the glowing eyes never blinked, never looked away. They were patient, watching, surrounding. Cade lifted his weapon, aiming at the closest pair of eyes. "Say the word, Captain," he whispered, tension in every syllable. Rayner did not answer immediately. His gaze was fixed on the glowing structure, on the strange pulse that had now quickened, beating in rhythm with the movement underground. He finally spoke, his voice cold. "They're not attacking. Not yet. They're protecting something." Ilara's breath caught in her throat. "Protecting this," she said, pointing to the living structure. Her voice was trembling, but her mind raced. "This isn't just a machine. It's a nest. And we're standing in the middle of it." The words hung heavy in the frozen air. Jonas felt his stomach twist as the soil near his boots cracked again, small tendrils of glowing roots creeping out like veins of light. He stumbled back, but the roots retreated quickly, as if teasing him, reminding them all that the ground itself was alive. Above them, the sky grew darker, as if clouds of dust or ash were forming. The red eyes in the shadows began to blink in unison, pulsing with the same rhythm as the living structure. Rayner clenched his fists, his face grim. The mystery was clear now, but so was the danger. The base had not been abandoned by mistake. It had been left as a warning, a tomb sealed for good reason. And now, they had awakened it. The silence in the backyard had turned into a living thing, wrapping itself around the explorers like chains they could not break. The red eyes in the shadows watched them with unblinking hunger, circling just outside the beams of their lights. The glowing structure in the soil pulsed faster now, its surface rippling as if it could feel their presence. The ground shivered under their boots, soft groans rising from beneath as though the planet itself was stirring awake. Captain Rayner stood still, every muscle tense, his hand hovering near the sidearm strapped to his leg. He did not want to fire, not yet, because he knew a single shot could bring every shadow down upon them. His voice, steady but quiet, cut through the heavy air. "Nobody move unless I say so." Dr. Alara's scanner squealed with frantic beeps, the green light flickering wildly. Her hands shook as she stared at the readings. "They're everywhere," she whispered. "Beneath us. Around us. The entire ground, it's full of them." Jonas stepped back instinctively, his eyes darting to the cracks in the soil. His voice cracked. "We can't fight that. We have to get out now." But even as he spoke, the soil beside him shifted and split. A long, sharp limb burst upward, covered in metal and sinew, scraping against the air like the blade of a sword. Jonas stumbled backward, his chest pounding, and Lieutenant Cade instantly raised his weapon. "Contact!" he shouted, finger tightening on the trigger. Before Cade could fire, the creature rose fully from the ground. It was massive, towering over them, its body an unholy fusion of machine and flesh. Plates of dark steel were welded into its twisted frame, wires hanging like veins that pulsed with glowing blue liquid. Its head turned slowly, eyes burning like red coals, locking on the humans with cold intelligence. The creature made no sound, only a low mechanical hum that grew louder the closer it leaned toward them. Its limbs scraped against the broken earth, claws clicking in rhythm like the ticking of a clock counting down to disaster. Cade's instincts screamed to fire, but Rayner raised a hand sharply. "Hold," the captain commanded, his eyes locked on the beast. The creature moved closer, the ground trembling beneath its weight, yet it still did not attack. Instead, it stopped just a few feet away, its head tilting unnaturally as though studying them. Ilara's breath fogged her visor as she whispered, "It's not killing us, it's watching." The air was so heavy that every second stretched into an eternity. Jonas clutched his tool pack like a weapon, his knuckles pale. "It's waiting for something," he muttered. Rayner narrowed his eyes, watching the glowing structure behind the creature. Its pulsing had slowed, matching the rhythm of the monster's hum. "It's connected," he said quietly. "That thing is tied to the base." As if hearing him, the creature suddenly straightened, its limbs cracking with a sound like grinding stone. Its eyes flared brighter, and with one sharp movement, it slammed a claw into the soil. The ground shook violently, throwing the explorers off balance. Cracks split open in every direction, glowing veins of light spilling out as more shapes began to crawl upward. Red eyes blinked through the dust, dozens of them, each rising with the same mechanical hum. Panic flared in Jonas's voice. "We're surrounded." He turned to Rayner, desperation clear in his tone. "Captain, if we don't move now, we're dead." The captain's mind raced. He knew panic would kill them faster than any monster. His voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Stay together. Back toward the entrance, slow and steady. Don't break formation." The team began to move, their lights sweeping across the yard. The creatures circled closer, crawling up from the earth with clawed limbs and armored hides. Each one seemed grown from the planet itself, fused with the broken machines left behind. Their eyes glowed in perfect unison, never breaking contact with the explorers. The air buzzed with static, a strange electric charge that made their skin prickle even through their suits. As they stepped back, one of the creatures lunged forward with sudden speed. Its claws slashed across the ground, tearing metal crates apart like paper. Cade fired instantly, his weapon flashing bright. The blast hit the creature square in the chest, knocking it back with a screech that rattled their bones. The sound was not natural, it was both mechanical and alive, filled with rage. The other creatures answered the cry, their hums growing louder, rising into a chorus of fury. Rayner's voice roared over the noise. "Move!" The team broke into a controlled retreat, their weapons firing flashes of light across the shadows. The creatures swarmed closer, claws striking sparks against the ground, their glowing eyes multiplying in the dark. Every step toward the entrance felt slower, heavier, as though the base itself resisted their escape. Dr. Alara glanced at her scanner as they ran, her voice trembling but urgent. "They're not chasing us to kill us. They're herding us." Jonas shouted back, panic in his voice. "Herding us where?" She looked toward the center of the yard, where the glowing structure pulsed brighter than ever. Her eyes widened with terror. "Back to the nest." The realization struck Rayner like ice. The creatures weren't random monsters. They were guardians, programmed or bred to defend the living machine at all costs. He fired his weapon at the nearest beast, its chest bursting with sparks, but another immediately replaced it. His mind screamed at him to run, but he forced his voice to stay firm. "Keep moving. Don't let them cut us off." The entrance was still far ahead, but the creatures were everywhere now, crawling from cracks in the soil, rising from behind broken walls, dropping from shattered beams above. The air was filled with their hums, their claws scraping in rhythm, their red eyes glowing like a sea of fire. The explorers fired, shouted, stumbled, but they pushed forward, clinging to hope like a fragile thread. At last, they reached the base of the final wall near the door. The gate loomed ahead, closed and dark. Jonas rushed to the panel, his hands shaking as he pulled out his tools. Sparks flew as he tried to hack the controls. "It's dead," he shouted. "Power's gone." Behind them, the creatures moved closer, their eyes filling the yard with crimson light. The ground trembled again, harder this time, and from the center of the nest a new shape began to rise. Larger, taller, more terrible than the rest. Its glowing eyes were not red but white, bright and blinding, filled with cold authority. The other creatures froze at its arrival, lowering their heads like servants before a queen. The explorers turned, breath caught in their throats. The monstrous figure towered above them, its body a fusion of metal spines and living muscle, its wings like broken machines stretching wide. The hum of its body was deeper, louder, shaking the earth with every movement. It looked down at the humans with something more than hunger. It looked at them with recognition. Captain Rayner's heart thundered as he realized the truth. This was no simple guardian. This was the Queen. And she had been waiting. The Queen towered above them, its monstrous form glowing faintly under the dim alien light, and for the first time since stepping into the backyard, the explorers felt the weight of something far older than themselves pressing down on their souls. Its eyes burned white, brighter than the stars above, and every lesser creature bowed low at its presence. The air vibrated with its hum, deep and steady, a sound that shook through the bones of the humans as if the planet itself was warning them. The team stood frozen, weapons trembling in their hands, but Captain Rayner forced himself to remain steady. He had faced war, storms, and death itself, but never had his instincts screamed so loudly that they did now. He whispered, more to himself than to the others, "This isn't just a monster. This is their leader." Dr. Alara's scanner flashed violently, its readings breaking into static and chaos. She shook it, her voice quivering as she spoke. "The signal, it's not just coming from the nest. It's coming from her. She's the source." Jonas, still crouched near the dead control panel, stared at the towering queen with wide, terrified eyes. If she's the source, then she's the reason this base is still alive. She's been controlling everything, waiting for us. Cade raised his weapon, his finger tight on the trigger. His soldier's instincts demanded action, but Rayner raised his hand sharply. "No," the captain ordered. "We don't fire until we understand what we're up against." The queen lowered her head slowly, her gaze locking onto them with a strange stillness. Her massive claws pressed into the ground, carving deep lines into the soil as her hum grew louder, resonating with the glowing structure at the nest center. The structure pulsed in response, alive and breathing, its energy veins crawling further across the soil like spreading roots. Alara's eyes widened as she pieced it together. "It's a symbiosis," she whispered. "The base, the nest, and her. They're all connected. The military must have built her to be the control system, the guardian that bound everything together." Rayner frowned, his voice grim. "And then they lost control." The truth sank into the group like ice. The base hadn't been destroyed by war or neglect. It had been abandoned because the very thing they built to protect it had become something else, something alive, something they couldn't command. Jonas's voice broke through the silence, shaking with fear. "So they left it here, locked it away. And now we've woken her up." The ground shuddered violently, throwing dust into the air as more creatures crawled up from below, their red eyes glowing brighter than before. They didn't attack, not yet. They stood like soldiers awaiting command, their heads bowed low before their queen. The explorers realized with horror that the swarm wasn't mindless. It was organized. They were an army. Rayner's mind raced. If the queen was the source of the signal, then she wasn't just protecting the nest. She was calling out. Someone, or something, was meant to hear her. "She's been sending the signal as a beacon," Rayner said darkly. "Not just to lure us, but to reach anyone, anywhere." Alara's face paled as the thought sank in. If she's broadcasting, then others could already be coming. Not just us. Anyone who hears it. And if they land here, her voice trailed off, the terror unspoken. Cade finished it for her, his voice like steel. "They won't leave alive." The queen shifted, spreading her mechanical wings wide. Their broken metal joints screeched, and sparks danced across them as though lightning lived within her body. The glow of her eyes intensified, and the swarm echoed her hum, filling the yard with a chorus so loud it rattled the walls of the ruined base. The explorers clutched their helmets, their suits vibrating from the sound. It was not just noise, it was communication, a command passing through every creature in the hive. Jonas covered his ears in panic, shouting above the roar. "We can't fight this. We're ants in her nest." Rayner grabbed his arm, forcing him back to focus. "We're not here to fight," the captain barked. "We're here to survive." He turned to Alara. "Can you shut down the signal?" She shook her head frantically, her scanner sparking in her hands. "I don't think it can be shut down. It's not coming from a machine, it's coming from her. She is the signal." The queen's head tilted, her white eyes narrowing, and for a chilling moment it felt as though she understood their words. Her gaze fixed on Rayner, and in that silent stare was something deeper than hostility. It was recognition. Rayner's breath caught as a memory surfaced, rumors from the old wars, whispers of military experiments that went too far, of commanders who tried to merge living creatures with machines to create perfect guardians. Experiments abandoned, files erased, histories buried. But here was proof, towering above him, alive, breathing, and staring as though she knew who he was. The tension broke in an instant. The queen raised her claw high, slamming it into the ground. The soil split open in a thunderous quake, and the explorers stumbled as the cracks spread beneath their feet. From the glowing fissures, hundreds of red eyes blinked awake, crawling toward the surface. The swarm was no longer waiting. They were being unleashed. Rayner shouted over the chaos, his voice commanding and firm. "Fall back to the control room. Move." The team broke into a sprint, weapons flashing as creatures lunged at them from the shadows. Cade fired in sharp bursts, his shots tearing through the swarm, but for every beast that fell, 3 more rose. Jonas hauled his gear across his back, gasping for breath, his eyes wide with panic. Elara stumbled, but Rayner caught her arm, pulling her forward, refusing to let anyone fall behind. They crashed through the ruined halls of the base, the hum of the swarm echoing behind them like the roar of an approaching storm. Dust fell from the ceilings as the ground shook with every step of the Queen, who was following slowly, her massive frame too large to fit through the halls but her presence never fading. The swarm poured through the cracks and vents, crawling across walls and ceilings, their eyes glowing in the dark. At last, the explorers burst into the control room, slamming the door shut behind them. The room flickered with dead screens and broken consoles, but in the center stood one terminal still glowing faintly, a remnant of the base's old systems. Rayner shoved Jonas toward it. "Get it running. We need answers now." Jonas dropped to his knees, his tools sparking as he fought to bring the terminal alive. The screen flickered, static giving way to fractured logs and data files. Elara leaned in, her heart racing as the words appeared, broken but clear enough to understand. Her voice trembled as she read aloud, "Project Guardian. Phase 3. Primary subject, Hybrid Control Unit. Status, uncontrolled. Command abandoned." She swallowed hard. This was never a defense project. It was a weapon. And now it has no master. The hum outside grew louder, pounding against the walls like a heartbeat. Dust shook from the ceiling, lights flickered, and the Queen's shadow passed across the window, her white eyes blazing like moons. Rayner clenched his fists, his voice low but steady. "Now we know the truth. But knowing won't save us. The only question is, how do we get out alive before she decides to finish what she started?" The control room trembled as though the base itself was alive, its walls rattling with the chorus of the swarm outside. Every second, the hum of the creatures grew louder, pounding like drums of war. The shadows crawling across the windows were endless, claws scraping against metal, eyes glowing red in the dark like an ocean of fire. The team huddled close to the single glowing terminal, its broken screen flashing with fragments of the old project logs. Jonas typed furiously, sweat pouring down his face despite the chill in the air. Sparks flew from his tools as he forced the dying console to respond. The words that scrolled across the screen confirmed their worst fears: Guardian prototypes, failed. Adaptive response, uncontrollable. Subject evolved beyond human command. Facility abandoned to prevent outbreak. Elara's voice shook as she read the broken text aloud. They tried to destroy her. They failed. The Queen survived and rebuilt her swarm. This whole base, it's been her nest for decades. Her voice cracked, horror filling every word. And we woke her up. The sound outside surged as if the creatures understood her words. The walls shook under their weight, claws dragging long scars into the steel. Cade raised his weapon, his teeth gritted as he scanned the door. They're coming through. It's only a matter of time. His instincts told him to fight, to burn every last charge in his rifle, but even he knew the truth, this was no battle they could win. Rayner stood tall, his eyes locked on the faint glow of the terminal. "We need to think," he said firmly, though the tension in his voice betrayed his fear. "There has to be something here we can use. The military wouldn't have left without a failsafe." Jonas shook his head without looking up, his hands working desperately over the broken wires. "If there was one, it's long gone. They left this place to die, Captain. And us with it." The ceiling groaned as cracks spread across it. Dust rained down in choking clouds, and a massive shadow passed overhead. The Queen's silhouette filled the window, her wings scraping against the walls, her white eyes burning like twin suns. She didn't rush. She didn't need to. Her swarm battered at the doors and vents, but she herself moved slowly, patiently, as though she knew her prey could not escape. Then, the door gave its first scream. Metal bent inward, claws piercing through with sparks. The swarm's hum grew into a roar, vibrating the air so violently it felt like the explorers' hearts were beating in rhythm with the creatures outside. Cade raised his rifle, firing bursts into the vent where a creature's limbs began to force their way inside. Sparks lit the room, the smell of burning flesh and steel filling the air. The creature shrieked and withdrew, but more pressed forward to replace it. Ilara's scanner wailed, its signal overwhelmed by the hundreds of life forms around them. She clutched it close, her voice breaking. They're not just surrounding us. They're waiting for her command. She hasn't given it yet. She's holding them back. Her words made the silence inside the room heavier than ever. Rayner looked toward the massive shadow of the Queen beyond the glass. He realized she wasn't in a rush to destroy them. She was studying them, the way a scientist studied specimens in a cage. The thought chilled him deeper than death. The door bent again, the steel screaming under the weight of claws. Cade cursed under his breath, firing another burst. "We're out of time, Captain," he shouted. Jonas suddenly yelled, "Wait!" His hands flew over the terminal, his face lit by the green glow. "There's something, an emergency override system. It's buried deep, but it's here." Ilara leaned over his shoulder, eyes wide. "What does it do?" Jonas's fingers shook as he read the corrupted text. "Failsafe purge. Power overload to the central core. It'll fry the nest, maybe even her." The room fell silent except for the shrieking swarm outside. Rayner's eyes narrowed. "And us?" Jonas looked up, pale as death. "If we trigger it, the whole base goes up. We'll never make it to the ship in time." The choice slammed into them like a hammer. Sacrifice themselves to end the swarm, or try to escape and risk unleashing the Queen on the galaxy. The Queen's shadow shifted, her eyes blazing brighter, as though she somehow understood the choice before them. The door finally gave way. With a metallic scream, it tore open, and the first wave of creatures poured inside. Red eyes glowed in the dark as claws slashed forward. Cade opened fire, his rifle blazing as he tore through the first attackers. Sparks and smoke filled the room, the swarm screeching as they climbed the walls and ceiling, flooding the chamber like a tide of death. Ilara screamed, firing her sidearm wildly as Jonas ducked beneath the terminal, shielding it with his body. Rayner drew his weapon, his shots precise and deadly, his voice booming above the chaos. "Hold them back." The swarm surged closer, their claws tearing through consoles, their shrieks rattling the walls. The Queen outside watched silently, her massive head turning as if listening to their every cry. She could have crushed the control room in an instant, but she waited, her intelligence clear in her stillness. Jonas's voice roared over the chaos. "Captain! I can trigger the failsafe now." His hands hovered over the final command, sweat dripping from his brow. The console sparked under his touch, its old systems groaning with power it hadn't used in decades. Ilara shouted through the storm of noise. "If we do this, none of us walk out." Cade fired until his rifle overheated, the weapon glowing red in his hands. He dropped it, pulling his blade free as a creature lunged at him. His roar echoed as steel tore into the beast's throat. Blood and sparks showered the floor, the swarm screaming louder in response. Rayner's heart thundered in his chest. He looked at Jonas, then at his crew, their faces locked in terror and defiance. In the reflection of the cracked window, he saw the Queen watching, her glowing eyes fixed only on him. In that silent gaze, he understood, this was no longer just survival. This was a choice that could decide the fate of worlds. And as the swarm closed in, claws flashing and screams filling the air, Captain Rayner made his decision. The room was chaos. Creatures poured through the torn door, their claws raking across the walls, their shrieks rattling through bone and metal alike. Sparks and smoke filled the air as consoles burst under the onslaught. Jonas screamed as he clung to the terminal, the screen flashing with warnings, each one begging for a command to complete the override. Ilara fired until her weapon sputtered empty, then swung it like a club against the swarm that crawled from every vent. Cade was drenched in blood, his own and theirs, as he slashed and roared, refusing to let them take one more step without a fight. Through it all, Captain Rayner stood in the center, his gaze locked on the massive shadow outside the cracked window. The Queen hovered silently, her white eyes burning into the room. She didn't strike, didn't move, didn't kill them outright, she was waiting. Testing them. And Rayner felt the weight of it in his chest. To her, they weren't enemies. They were a puzzle. A final experiment. Jonas's desperate voice cut through the chaos. "Captain, it's ready. Say the word and I'll trigger it." His hand hovered over the command, trembling. The base shook again, dust raining down as something massive moved beneath the floor. The queen swarm pressed harder, their claws scraping closer, their eyes glowing like fire in the dark. Time was gone. Rayna's voice thundered above the storm. "Do it." Jonas slammed his hand down on the command. The console shrieked with power, ancient circuits roaring awake after decades of silence. Red warning lights strobed across the room, bathing them in a blood-colored glow. The hum of the failsafe built like a rising scream, vibrating the air until their teeth ached. The queen's white eyes widened, her head tilting slightly as if she understood what they had done. For the first time, she moved. Her wings snapped open, slamming against the walls of the base with a thunderous crack. Her shriek tore through the control room like a blade of fire, shattering glass and shaking metal to its core. The swarm went berserk, their movements no longer patient or measured but frantic, desperate. They knew what was coming. The floor split open as veins of light tore through the cracks, the core of the base overloading with unstable energy. Jonas's console exploded in a shower of sparks, throwing him backward into Alara's arms. She screamed his name, dragging him away from the fire as the swarm pushed harder, their claws tearing into flesh and armor. Cade swung his blade one final time, cutting down two creatures before a third slammed him to the ground. He roared, fighting with everything he had, even as claws pierced his armor. Rayna grabbed Alara, pulling her and Jonas toward the shattered window. Beyond it, the queen loomed larger than life, her wings blocking out the dying light of the planet below. Her shriek filled the air again, shaking the glass so violently it cracked in spiderweb patterns. Rayna felt his chest burn as the failsafe's energy screamed louder, a sound like the world itself tearing apart. He knew they had only seconds. "We jump!" Rayna shouted, pointing to the broken edge of the control room that opened to the ruined yard below. Alara's eyes went wide. "That's suicide." But Rayna's grip on her arm was iron. "Stay here and you burn with the nest. Move." Together, they leapt. The glass gave way with a final shatter, and the three of them fell into the chaos of the glowing yard. The ground pulsed beneath them, veins of light bursting upward as the core's power ripped through the soil. The swarm shrieked in madness, scattering in every direction, no longer attacking but fleeing the death that came from below. Rayna hit the ground hard, the breath ripped from his lungs. Pain seared through his body, but he forced himself up, dragging Alara and Jonas with him. Above, Cade's roar echoed one last time before the control room vanished in a burst of white fire. The queen rose higher, her wings catching the violent light. The explosion tore upward, ripping the yard apart, throwing fire and stone into the sky. The swarm scattered like ashes in the wind. For a heartbeat, Rayna thought it was over. The base cracked apart, its structures crumbling into fire, the failsafe devouring everything it touched. But then he saw her. The queen did not fall. She hovered in the sky, her massive wings burning, her body lit with streaks of white fire. Her scream was not of death but fury. The failsafe tore through her swarm, her nest, her world, but she endured. Her glowing eyes fixed on the three survivors below, not with hunger, not with curiosity anymore, but with rage. Alara's voice broke. "She's still alive." Rayna stared up at her, his chest tight with the weight of what they had done. The base was gone, the swarm shattered, but the queen had survived. And now, stripped of her nest, she would not hide in the shadows any longer. She would come for them. For their ship. For their world. The ground cracked violently again, a final eruption tearing through the ruins. Fire and light consumed the yard, forcing Rayna to drag Alara and Jonas into the shadows of a collapsed tower. The air burned hot, the roar of the explosion drowning out everything. When the light finally dimmed, the base was gone. Nothing remained but ash, ruin, and silence. But above the smoke, her shadow lingered. The queen drifted higher, her massive wings glowing with fire. She did not dive to kill them. She did not unleash her fury now. Instead, she rose into the sky, her scream echoing across the dead planet like a vow. She was leaving. Rayna fell to his knees, his strength gone. Alara clutched Jonas to her chest, tears streaking her face. The captain's eyes followed the Queen until she vanished into the dark. His heart pounded with the truth he could not escape. They had destroyed the nest, but not the threat. The galaxy would soon know her name. And as the silence of the ruined planet pressed in around them, Rayner whispered words meant only for himself. We didn't end it. We started it.